You can see the Branch Creek flowing through our meadow. Actually, we moved back to this home of my childhood in the 37th year of our marriage. The original house was built around 1808 for Abraham and Susan Shoemaker Aldifer, just across the creek from Father John Aldifer's mill. After age 2, I grew up in my great-great-great-grandfather's retirement house at the end of the lane. I always wanted to go out to the barn. My 2 oldest sisters were the biblically named Lois and Eunice. We were part of a clan of 23 cousins, all living in a radius of a mile. Our grandmother, Susan Aldifer Landis, was a very nice part of our life, as was her cheerful but slow-learning brother Joni, who went with the place. In 1936, I went to the Lower Salford Consolidated School at age 6. Though my parents never put a tie on me, the photographer did. At the age of 8, I was baptized in a young rural mission at Finland, some 9 miles from our home. My father got a Kodak from Sears Roebuck when I was 11. These were his children, plus cousins and neighbors. We were an old-fashioned family, with Carolyn the youngest. We all loved music. Roma's maternal line was from a Mennonite farm in Cambria County. Her father, Paul Jacobs, was a city boy from Johnstown who came out to what was then a lovely country home to marry a farmer's daughter. In his old age, he remembered where he had carved his name on a rock. Paul and Trella Risch Jacobs had a very lively family. There were 11 children, and they brought a passel of grandchildren home for reunions. The Jacobs mansion was an amalgam of additions to what began as a Sears Roebuck house before 1915. Roma, the 10th child, was close enough to the country to learn some country facts. She was born in 1931, a year later than I was. She, too, went to a rural consolidated school, wearing galoshes. Unlike my home, the Jacobses had a radio, and Paul liked the ball games. In the 4th grade, I had a teacher who lived just across the road from us. I had cousins and neighbors for playmates, in, around, and in winter on the branch. I grew up milking cows, in which I was later joined by all 4 of my sisters. My dad took this picture outside of the barn one evening. My first local publication at 16 was limited in distribution to the home place. In 1944, my parents sent me to Lancaster Mennonite School, 55 miles to the west. Roma attended a public high school. She sang in an ensemble there. She loved music. I grew up in farm work. Here my dad and I are carrying a bundle of baling wire. Cousin Jake Landis, who also lived on the place, drove the tractor, while old Joni, who always wanted something to do, found a role in keeping the straw from spilling out of the Ann Arbor baler. The bale wires were tied by hand as we traversed a field that is now a suburban neighbor's back lawn. At a Landis reunion in 1947, I pitched quoits with Marvin Durstein, Harold Culp, and Jake Landis. At school, I was in a quartet with Lancaster's Milford and Albert Mast and Delaware's Paul Bender. I graduated from Lancaster Mennonite High School in 1948, and a year later, Roma graduated from Eastern Mennonite High School in Virginia. Around home, I was in another quartet with Paul Myers, Ernie Hange, and Ted Walter. Roma and I met in 1949 when we were both freshmen at EMC. The next summer, my life changed when the lot for minister fell on me at the age of 20. I proposed right away, and we were married on May 26, 1951, at Roma's home. We set up housekeeping in a trailer next to my boyhood home. What did I care where we lived as long as I had Roma? 11 months later, we had our first child. As a minister, I presided at my sister Eunice's wedding to Don Mast. There was a 60th anniversary gathering for my grandparents on the home farm, where young Joe Landis sat next to me for the picture. For over 7 years, I prepared a sermon almost every week, and sometimes 2 or 3. I'd been ordained for a mission in the town of Conshohocken, 17 miles from home. After 3 years, I went to Eastern Baptist College, and on a choir tour to New England, posed with classmates Jim Meek and Tony Campolo. In our row house in Conshohocken, Roma was usually making something. Sometimes I cut classes to work for poultry processors Norman and Orvilla Souder. Roma came up to Spring City with our second child, Jay Allen. I worked Saturdays for the Souders in a farmer's market in Chester. I bought a Kodak Brownie movie camera there at Christmas 1956, and my helper Jim Meek used it on me selling the last turkey of the day. When I graduated from college in May '56, the photographer asked for my parents, probably thinking I wasn't married. Then I got a job in Philadelphia and commuted daily by train to 17th and Chestnut Streets, where I edited Sunday school materials for the American Baptist Publication Society. Roma often made my lunch, as she expected a third child. A farmer from Dublin, Linwood Landis, often stopped and gave us things left over from market. Could we use it? We got together with our little congregation for Christmas caroling. Christmas Eve, 1956, in our Conshohocken home. First the story, then some gifts. We played piggyback a lot. And Jay got to the point where he wasn't afraid to jump backward off the refrigerator or take an airplane ride. Our landlord, Norman Souder, made our back porch into a bedroom. That's where I told Brer Rabbit stories by the yard. Christmas 1956 had us out at my boyhood home for dinner. Only to find that my grandfather Abraham Landis had had a stroke. His funeral was at his lifelong Salford Mennonite congregation a mile away. Soon after that, Grandma Jacobs came to our house in Conshohocken. The occasion was the birth of Philip Gerhardt Ruth, brought home by his mother from Montgomery Hospital in Norristown. Back on the farm, there was an auction for my grandmother's things. Visiting the branch brought a lot of fun for Dawn and Jay. And there was more enjoyment riding the old John Deere, steered by a motherless newcomer, Siegfried Rebnegger of Austria, who joined my parents at the age of 14. When I was offered a graduate fellowship to study English at Harvard, I asked my bishops, Elmer Kolb and John Lapp, for permission to go. When they gave it, I took this picture. So at the age of 27 and 26, Roma and I became residents of Massachusetts. In a real gesture of community, 2 members of the Conshohocken Mission, Homer Kolb and Norman Sauter, offered to haul some of our things to the apartment we found in Belmont, Massachusetts. The first time I got in the car and drove to neighboring Cambridge, I relished the thought that nobody in the world knew where I was. It was delightful to watch students crisscrossing famous Harvard Yard. And I got lost in Widener Library, never dreaming that it had been constructed by a Franconia Conference Mennonite, Joe Bechtel. In our Belmont apartment, baby Philip took his first steps. And made a bath an experience. This was where Dawn's first day of school came. And soon Jay followed her to kindergarten. Out front, Dawn had a lemonade business for at least one afternoon. And late into the night I could read, "Weep no more, woeful shepherds, weep no more, for Lycidas your sorrow is not dead. Sunk though he be beneath the ocean floor, so sinks the day-star in his ocean bed, and yet anon repairs his drooping head." At Thanksgiving, Roma made us what we could afford. Chicken is as good as turkey anyway. And she made a Puritan's hat out of some cranberry sauce. We got home every now and then to see the grandparents. And then we moved from Belmont to a new apartment in nearby Watertown. That's where I had my 28th birthday. Roma's parents came on a visit all the way from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts. About the only recreation we could afford in those years was going to Walden Pond, a few miles to the north. Then in 1960, having just passed my orals, I was invited to preach for a little Quaker congregation at the southeastern edge of Massachusetts. In a year and a half here, we got to know a whole new set of people. Dr. Stuart Kirkcaldy became a good friend. He not only joined the Friends meeting, but became its long-term clerk. Never was our family more readily accepted than in this neighborhood that we had been warned would resist outsiders. An annual parade went right by our house on Main Road in Central Village. In 1962, I returned to my alma mater to teach English. Here I collaborated with Dr. Harold Howard, later dean and now provost of the college. Our family moved to an old house in King of Prussia, 2 or 3 miles from the college. The congregation of the former Conshohocken Mission now met in our house as the King of Prussia Mennonite Fellowship. In a Sunday school class in my study were Billy Blake, later killed in a police shooting, and Ann Hostetler, later English professor at Goshen College. I skated with the family on one of the 3 ponds on Eastern's beautiful campus. Or came back home to the branch for a Sunday afternoon walk. We visited the parents of novelist John Updike and took up their offer to pick their grapes for our own use. One venture, making elderberry wine from a Mennonite recipe, blew up while I was grading final exams. It decorated both the kitchen and dining room walls. In 1964, Roma's dad, Paul Jacobs, died after one final winter in Florida. Then there was an auction at the Jacobs house, too. In our King of Prussia home, there were many visitors. One night, while Roma was at chorus practice with Philadelphia's Singing City, the children and I did a documentary titled The Ruth Antiques. We only had a few. Back at Harvard in 1966, I was mugged on a summer night outside the home of Professor Owen Gingrich. They got $3. That same summer brought a great moment at music camp at Laurelville, where Alice Parker led her Christopher Dock cantata, involving everybody there, including the children. Auctioneer Sanford Aldifer asked me to read the information from a bundle of Lower Salford deeds he was selling in Souderton. Years before, I had begun to talk about such things to the children, trying to orient them in the scene to which eventually they would return to live. At our King of Prussia home, Jay and Phil did some dangerous sledding with David Pyle, son of Alice and Tom. At Eastern College, I made a circle of student friends. Many an hour was spent with them in my third-floor office in Ott Hall. At a family reunion in 1967, I was asked to tell stories of our ancestors. There, I introduced both my parents and my own family. Meanwhile, Roma's mother had moved to a trailer next to daughter Dorothea Otto's home in Springs. Now the hilarious Jacobs reunions moved to the lawn at the Ottos. Finally, in 1968, the postman brought to King of Prussia my Ph.D. diploma from Harvard. That fall, our family of 5 left for my sabbatical leave in Germany. I had an office on the 11th floor at the University of Hamburg. In the Hauptgebäude, I lectured on anything from American Puritans to Wallace Stevens. We bought a new VW bus and drove it nearly 20,000 miles across Europe. In the summer of 1969, Jan Gleistein joined us as I gathered footage for a film about Christopher Dock. We stopped for one photo in a village in Alsace. Back home, I grew a beard to play Christopher Dock in the film.
Well, children, I believe it's about time to close up school for the day.
In 1971, our family moved to the village of Vernfield, 2 miles from my boyhood home. It was amazing to see members of the Salford congregation appear with trucks to help us move. It all happened fast, and then there was even chicken corn soup. The setting behind our house was beautiful, running back to the Branch Creek. Though totally unexpected by me, I was almost immediately invited to serve as an assistant minister at Salford, where we attended. For a while, I served on the board of the Christopher Dock High School. The New York Times did a story on the awakening historical awareness of our community. Its photographer took a shot of Roma doing one of her first frock tours. She began to take models from actual local frock tour, such as this one of 1785 at Alderfer's Mill. I appreciated the authentic look this gave to her growing output. I wrote a book about Conrad Grebel for Conrad Grebel College. In 1973, I helped to lead my first tour with Tour Imagination, serving as commentator. Then I worked with Burton Buller of Nebraska on a documentary film about the Amish. Around this time, Richard Detweiler, a local Mennonite leader, invited me to drop teaching as a career and work on themes of Mennonite heritage. Shortly thereafter, Roma designed a cover for a book I wrote about Mennonites in the American Revolution. That year, Dawn married Paul Nelson, her friend from Goshen College days. Roma's frock tour output included the lettering on our mailbox at Vernfield. She came out to Saskatchewan, where Burton Buller and I were making a documentary about the Hutterites. And for a moment there, I didn't know which one she was. Burton and I went to Paraguay for a project which brought us to Indian settlements. At home, Roma fulfilled a long-time dream by going back to school to become a nurse.
When you hold the water, then I'm going to give you some medicine, okay? Because you were already snoring.
Oh, yeah. I like the music better than the singing.
You don't care for the singing as much.
At the same time, she kept up her artistic ventures, here with her sisters and mother making a quilt for son Phil's upcoming marriage. In 1981, Roma flew to Dublin, Ireland, to welcome our first grandchild, Sarah. At home, there was an unending stream of visitors to Vernfield, such as Roma's brothers and sisters. Mike Gard of Ireland, Willis and Dorothy Miller, Tom and Carolyn Nolan. A Midwestern girlfriend brought eastward by Phil, and another one from nearby Ledrock by Jay. It was in 1982 that the 117-year-old barn came down in Branch Valley. Roma still had her mother until 1985. Yearly, Roma and I were joined on our wedding anniversary by Roma's brother Don and wife Anna Ruth. In 1984, my history of the local Mennonites was presented to me by my future pastor, James Longacre. While I was teaching a winter writing class at Bethel College in Kansas, Roma's mother died. Now Roma made a frock tour for a grandson, Peter Nelson. With no advertising, people came to order certificates, rewards, and pick out designs in the kitchen. Suddenly, the old home place in Branch Valley went on the market. It was a place of deep memory, now to be divided into pieces. The cow stable where I had milked in the barn was only a ruin. Could we move here? The Salford congregation encouraged us and came to help. Every Saturday for 2 or 3 months, a crew of volunteers appeared. Roma and I were simply astounded at this experience of communal support. There were so many things to fix, including dangerous old wells to be filled. After only a few years, Roma said we should have a family room. It was built onto the house's southern end. Inside, Roma painted a frock tour wall decoration proclaiming the earth is the Lord's and listing all the owners of this property since it was bought by William Penn in 1684. Now Dawn and Paul brought their family here on a visit from Ireland. Above what was left of the barn, we installed a studio for Branch Valley Productions. And all along I continued to serve with Wilmer Martin in Europe with Tour Imagination. For over a decade, I worked on a history of the Lancaster Mennonite Conference. I expected it to appear almost yearly. Now at last it's projected for 2001. All along, too, I watched the emergence of Joanne Hess Segrist's project, a historic harvest of Lancaster Mennonite photography. Almost every spring, I led a so-called Branch Creek hike with Salford Church's children. Roma's frock tour production has never stopped, whether at home or for clients like the Mennonite Historical Society. Most are made with specific recipients in mind, such as Harold and Fern Aldifer, and some are donated to the MYF or other money-raising sales. A very special one, adapted from the work of a Bucks County Mennonite artist, came to me on my 69th birthday. It was certainly unusual for me to have my parents to the age of at least 70, as they were 91 and approaching 96 years old. And now our life is made joyful by the presence of grandchildren. A total of 9 came to us in a decade and a half. It's wonderful to hear one after another begin to read. Every birthday is an opportunity to pull an ear. As the biblical writer says, that our sons may be as plants grown up in their youth, that our daughters may be as cornerstones polished like a palace. Whether watching them coming to terms with the branch, or hearing them read the Christmas story to the family, or giving a talk at graduation from Christopher Dock High School, we give thanks for that moment on May 26, 1951, when our two so different hearts and lives became one.